my birthday party, and now it is November 6th, and this is the third tape in a series of tapes of my father giving some reflections on his life. And the part of the story that we're up to right now is, so you just moved to Philadelphia, and you're the educational director of the school at OCJCC, a school of 800 kids. And okay, where are you?
I can see why they were leery about hiring me. I was only 31 years old, with very limited experience, and certainly no experience to run a school of 800 kids. The guy before me had been a part-timer, but a professional educator. A very nice guy. I met him subsequently. Anyhow, they looked at me a little bit askance. The teachers, when they met me, this little pipsqueak is going to run, who's he? But they found out after a while that I knew what I was doing, and I wasn't taking a crap from anybody. So I settled in. And
who was your boss? The rabbi?
Basically, the rabbi is the boss. But it's understood I run the school. The rabbi doesn't run the school.
Okay.
If there's a problem, he supersedes me. As a matter of fact, before I accepted the job, I had a call from one of the balabatim in the interview committee who wanted to know would I be strong enough to buck the rabbi if I had to. And that bothered me. And why should I have to buck the rabbi? But that passed. I spent a lot of time writing up a curriculum, meeting with teachers, planning for the school year, and learning about things I didn't know anything about, like what's a curriculum for confirmation classes 1, 2, and 3. I had some good people to work with, though. Rose Fried was then the director of the preschool. She stayed on all the time I was there, and she knew her job. She knew preschool very well. We had no high school. Such kids as planned to go on to high school went to Graz. That was about the size of it. Later on, the BGE formed a series of regional high schools of a number of congregations joining together, and one was the Greenstone High School, which was housed at OCJCC, and most of the kids then went there. But when I first came there was no high school. But nevertheless, I had to keep in mind what you do with 800 kids, probably around 500 or so in the Hebrew school, 3 or 4 classes of each grade level, and inadequate quarters to house that many kids. Even though confirmation kids met in the evening, and preschool kids met in 4 corners of the auditorium, because there was no classroom space for them, there was always the question of where do you put them all? But we worked it through, and I have a little organization skill, not like you, but some. So I was able to plan out so that we never found ourselves in a situation where we were confronted with an unexpected problem. It worked out pretty good. We had the usual problems arranging transportation, or a teacher looked cockeyed at a kid, and then we had from the parents, and those are the normal things that you'd expect. But they were pretty good years, and I'd asked for a salary at that point. I think I came to Iyar at 6,000. When I left, it was at 8,000, and that's what I asked for at OCJCC. I didn't want to be chas or something. Of course, in those days, afternoon school principals were making 10 to 15,000. First of all, I didn't know that, and second
So
of
they got a
all,
bargain.
yeah, oh yeah. As a matter of fact, in the third or fourth year I was there, we needed to buy a new TV, and the husband of my educational committee chairman owned a store that sold TVs, and I went there to buy the store, and they asked me for information. When I told him my salary, he said, "You mean you don't make $10,000 yet?"
And that's how you found out.
Yeah. But on the whole, they were good years. That's where, you know how Danny was born.
Why don't you tell me?
It was Grossman's Folly.
How so?
Danny was born in 1950.
I was born in 67. He was born 4 years early.
Yeah, 1963.
63, yeah.
1963. The anniversary of Jeffrey's birth.
Grossman's Folly.
I was making at that point probably around 8,500 or 9,000, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked, and then my contract was up for renewal, and I asked them to increase my salary over a 3-year period. 500 the first year, 1,000 the second year, 1,500 the third year. Aaron Grossman, who was a curmudgeon and a miserable kind of guy, was the president of the shul, and he said, "That's ridiculous. We'll give you the 1,500 this year."
Oh.
That was an unexpected windfall, and we gave homemade whoopee. So, Danny is Grossman's Folly.
Mm-hmm. I never asked you about this when you were talking about when Edwin and Jeff were born in Erie, but how long were you married before you had Ed?
Edwin and Jeff were born in Rochester.
In Rochester. How long had you been married before you had Ed?
Well, Edwin was born in 1953. We were married in 1952.
Okay, so you wasted no time building your family.
Your mother wanted a baby. And then in those days, she spent all 9 days at the hospital. Didn't come home. The bris was in the hospital.
Oh, really?
She came home the day after the bris.
Well, they don't do that anymore.
Oh, sir. And same thing with Jeff. The hospital was I'd say probably about Danny was born on Shabbos.
Mm-hmm.
And the hospital was probably about 20 minutes walk from where your grandparents lived. And from there to my apartment was probably another half an hour's walk or something, or maybe more. So I went, I drove your mother to the hospital, but then I walked.
Wait, who are you talking about? Which child?
Edwin.
Okay, so you walked from the hospital to
Then I walked from the hospital to
Grandma and Grandpa's house.
Yeah, and then from there all the way back to my apartment.
Mm-hmm.
It was a hell of a walk.
That's a schlep.
And everybody met and said, "It's a boy! It's a boy!"
So, all right. So now we're in Cleveland. Well, sorry, we're in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this huge job. How long had you been working before you got that raise?
Well, it was 1963, and then 59.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
But I had a $500 raise before that. But I expected 5,015. You got to 15 right away. Unexpected, totally unexpected. They had a very active principals council in Philadelphia, and by virtue of my job, I was a member of the principals council. And I became fairly active in that. Eventually became chairman of it. And that's how I got to know Dr. Bill Lackwitz, who was the director of the Board of Jewish Education, a little more intimately than I had known before. I'd spoken to him before and corresponded with him before I took a job at OCJCC, and of course in terms of finding teachers to replace at the beginning of a new school year, I would talk to him, but I didn't know him that well. I got to know him better when I was with the Principal's Council. Eventually, I've been at the school 8 years. This was 1966. 7 years, whatever it was. If you asked me if I would be interested in becoming the assistant principal, the assistant director of the board. And
you're now like 38 years old.
Yeah, so 8 or 9, something like that. And I said, well, I still have a year to go on my contract with OCJCC. Well, maybe that can be worked out. I said, if they will let me, I'd be delighted. Particularly would be a raise in there. I'd get $12,000 a year, which was huge. So I stuck it in my head. One day as I'm walking in the hall at OCJC, one of the knackers from the board of directors, officer or something, and by the way, enrollment had started to slip because the neighborhood was changing.
Already?
Yeah, it was getting older. When they started the school in 1956 or 57, to all a bunch of young bucks. But you know what happens to young bucks? They become old bucks.
Right.
The kids were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
The school, by that time maybe the school slipped down to 500 or 600, something like that. And he said to me, I know that you're very loyal to us and you wouldn't think of leaving us, but if anything comes up that sounds like you might be interested, don't hesitate. We wouldn't stand your way.
That's very gracious.
Okay. When I got this offer from Bill Ackritz, I remember those words. And I said to him, maybe we can work something out. So I approached my president at the time, and I told him I had this offer from the Board of Ed, and I had been approached by someone in the shul. Would it be possible for me to
end your contract a year
to
early?
end the contract a year earlier? He said, well, I don't see what there would be a problem, but let me talk to the boys. So a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks passed. I haven't heard from him. So approach him, and again, I tell him, what did the boys decide? Well, we haven't really decided anything yet, but I don't see there would be any problem. Well, so I called Bill Ackers and said, from what I hear, there won't be any problem. Anyhow, the whole thing dragged. And it turned topsy-turvy. I wanted to leave them, and I'm putting him in this position, and how did I, to the point where I was so angry. Ramarovsky the rabbi came to my house, and said to me, I'm going to have to talk to the board, and I want you to support me. No problem. So he called a board meeting. He never showed up. He was all the time in his office right next to where we were meeting.
Hiding.
Yeah. And then he came to my house after the board. The board meeting was a disaster. For one thing, I completely lost my temper, and I probably rambled and was very incoherent. It got to the point where they felt that I deserted them and others. And that the board vote was no, they would not let me out of a contract. Then the rabbi was very upset and came to the house to talk to me. I just about threw him out. I said, what business? You told me you'd be there to help me, to support me. What the hell were you? I said, you call yourself a rabbi? Is this the way a rabbi acts?
What'd he say?
Didn't say much.
Nothing he could say.
Didn't say much. Anyhow, we wouldn't let me out of contact. Called Bill. And I said, I can't do it. They won't let me out of contact. He said, well, how much more do you need to go there? I said, another year. He said, we'll hold the job open for you for a year.
Wow.
So I went back to work. The mother to this day doesn't understand how I did this, because one of a couple of the kids that taught for Bar Mitzvah during this period were the children of these people that maligned me. How can I said, what did kids have to do with it?
Yeah, it was foreshadowing things to come later in life.
Well, I don't know. So I finished out my 8 years with them, and what was it, 9 years? I don't remember anymore. And
they're the only shul in town.
Who?
That OCJCC.
Oh no.
Within walking distance of where you live.
No.
Are there other shuls within walking distance?
There was Temple Shalom, which was a big shul. There was Beth Emeth, which was a big school.
Other conservative shuls?
Conservative, yeah. They're all gone too.
For sure. All the while you're working at OCJCC, are you only davening at OCJCC?
Yeah.
And
well, not only that, it was also required to be in charge of youth. So I had to be there for the USY services, and organize the younger children's services, and all that sort of stuff.
And after
I ran USY, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. And after this exploded, and after you left, did you continue davening at OCJCC even after you left that job?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd.
Rafsky is still the rabbi.
Oh yeah. I had put bought a seat in honor of my parents.
A seat in the shul.
In the shul, yeah. No, what I had to do, I had to do. But they really, I could have been out there a year earlier. No great deal.
So now you're at the Board of Education.
I won with Board of Ed, and
that was Board of Ed, and was also was United Synagogue.
The Board of Ed in Philadelphia is a misnomer. It's a Philadelphia branch of the Board of Education of the United Synagogue. My nominal boss was Bill Leikwitz, but over him was Morton Siegel, who was in charge of the education department by the time I got there. I would come in every once in a while for national regional directors meeting and all that.
What was the purpose of Board of Ed?
To coordinate the conservative congregational schools.
Mm-hmm. So when you worked as the education,
and eventually he created the regional high school system.
When you worked as the educational director at OCJCC, were you in close contact with the Board of Ed then also in that capacity?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you met Bill initially.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Was OCJC the largest school of all the schools?
I don't think so. I'm not sure.
It was really the glory days of the conservative movement.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not sure. Beth Emeth was a huge school. The education director of Beth Emeth was a fellow by the name of Menachem Mauskopf. Good Jewish name, Mauskopf.
Mousehead. Nice. Okay, and your job.
Nice fellow.
And your job at the Board of Ed was as the
assistant director.
Assistant director, the number 2. Mm-hmm.
I basically had to invent a job. I found this, I've told this to Edwin, I've told other people. You get a prospectus, you're told of opening someplace, a job, and they may even tell you what they expect of you. Forget that. You create the job.
Right.
Yeah? When you took the job at the NCSY, Was it what you're doing now?
I wrote my own job description.
Exactly. You do.
And I think I only do half of those things and do lots of other things.
You invent a job.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true in the school, too.
Yes,
At the board, first, there was no place for me to sit. There was a big room with a clutter of old desks and chairs, and Bill put me at the far end, and then I really know what he wanted from me. But then it clarified a little over a while, and then a room became available, small, old, dilapidated room, but it was a room. I could close the door, open the window, whatever. And basically, I became very active, and I think I was a good assistant to him. I did a great job in teacher placement, which was an area that was sorely neglected and sorely needed. People would come in for an interview for a position, and I would see, and I would be in touch with all the principals and find out who needs what and when. And some people I'd refer, and some people I'd say sorry, but I don't see anything that would meet your needs. I remember one guy came in, was interested in a job in teaching in an afternoon school. I said, fine. What are your qualifications? I'm going in for the rabbinate. Good. Can you lead the services? I don't go to service. I believe in services. Did you read Hebrew?
Not so much.
I said, can you tell me what the Tanakh is, what the Chumash is?
No.
I said, how do you dare have the chutzpah to want to teach in a Jewish school? You're an ignoramus.
What does he say? I guess he didn't get the job.
I wouldn't refer him any place. But I did a lot of referrals, and I think probably in the years I was there, I must have referred more than 100 people to jobs in schools over the course of 3 years. I was there. I was in charge of the annual teachers conference. I was in charge of coordination with the principal's council. So it was a good 3 years. You ask your mother, they were the best 3 years of my professional life. Why? I'd get up in the morning, I'd take the bus to the train, I'd take the train downtown, I'd get off, I'd be there at 9 o'clock to start working. I finished at 5 o'clock and I'm home, I was finished. I didn't have any weekends, I didn't have any Sundays, I didn't have any evenings, I had no meetings.
Yeah, that's amazing. And
Bill was a wonderful guy to work with. He had a tragic end, you know. Bill, this happened years after I left. I was already in Cincinnati. Bill has a son, or had a son who lived in Cleveland. And I think on Thanksgiving he and his wife, who was a lovely lady.
Bill and his wife, or his son and his wife?
Bill and his wife
came
came to Cleveland to visit his son.
Right.
And I'm sure they had a wonderful weekend together. And then he drove home, and a few blocks from his home there was a terrible accident. He was killed. His wife was severely wounded. I don't know if she's regained her whole sanity even to this day.
Wow.
They were lovely people. It was a tragic
was he part of it was a multi-car accident, or was it just his accident?
I think he collided with another car.
Oh, that's terrible. Did you ever, when you were in that position, that happened after you already left, when you were in the position of the BJE, or whatever, Board of Jewish Education in Philadelphia, what became of your old position at OCJCC? Who took over for you?
First of all, they hired a shmegegi, a young rabbi who was a dapper dresser and snappy, answers, come up from the south someplace, I think. I don't remember his name anymore. and he was hired as assistant rabbi educational director. So when you wanted him to do something in the shul, he'd say, I'm the educational director. I don't have time for this. You want him to do something in the school, he'd say, I'm the assistant rabbi.
Clever.
You know who ran the school during that time? Your brother Jeff.
How so?
Because he knew where everything was. The teachers would need something to call them, or find things. The guy was a complete, not only a shmagegi, but a liar, and absolutely the worst you can imagine. He lay down, performed intermarriages, and
wow,
yeah,
all the way back then.
Yeah.
How long did he last?
Lasted a year.
Oh, that's all. It's not very long.
And then there was a procession of part-timers. For a while, I think Rose Fried ran it for a while, and there was some other part-timers who ran it.
And who did you succeed in Philly?
Also a part-time man. His name was Silverman. Very nice fellow. But he didn't have a chance. How could he run a school of 800 people on a part-time basis?
Forget it. Possible. And who followed you in Erie?
I have no idea.
Don't know.
The guy whom I succeeded, I've never met, but there were rumors swirling about his name. And supposedly he was caught in some indecent act with one of the kids.
There you go.
A pervert or something. I don't believe it to this day. What I believe may have happened, and this kid happened to be a grandson of this Max Silver, of a Knacker. What I believe may have happened is that Max Silver, that the principal, may have come in the bathroom and seen him masturbating, and said something to him.
And that was the end.
But these were the rumors, that he was a pervert.
Gotcha. Philadelphia. You're in the position of CJCC how many years? 8 years?
From 1959 to 1968.
Oh, so I was born, you were still at OCJCC. Okay. The picture that you have of that big dinner that was made for you, the send-off dinner, is that from OCJCC or was that from the board?
OC.
That was OCJCC.
Yeah. If you remember the sequence of the Parshas in Torah, Achremos, Kedoshim, Emor. Translate that.
Achremos, after the death.
Yeah.
What's the Kedoshim? Holiness. Emor is said.
After the guy's dead, you see how holy he was.
Oh, yeah. Right, correct. So they at least gave you a grand send-off.
The president and my school director and the rabbi and Bill Lackers was there and all.
That was nice. But Rose Samlin organized that for you, no?
I don't know who organized it. She may have had a hand in it, but I don't know who organized it.
All right, so BJE, good experience?
Very good. Very good.
But only 3 years. Not very long.
Well, yeah, and as I say, these were the happiest years, and I felt I was productive, and I felt I was appreciated. I would sit at my desk and have completed a piece of work or something, and Bill Lackers would come up to me and say, Max, that was a fine piece of work. I looked at him.
Positive reinforcement, how unusual.
I've heard, people come to me with complaints. I never had anybody give me compliments. It was very nice. I've been there from 1968 to 1970.
71.
Yeah. Or from 1969 to 71. And I'm sitting at home on one Motor Shabbos, and the phone rings. By the way, while I was there, in order to make a little extra panose, I also was teaching at Gratz College, particularly in the summers. I give courses at Grants College.
What do you teach on?
I taught some Tanakh. I taught some Perek. And there were nice people there. I had a wonderful time there. The guy who was then the president, he's now nifted already.
President of what?
Of Gratz College was my age. Things, the names disappear. The name will come back again. Anyhow, he was a good buddy of Joe Noble's, and I had met him before coming to Gratz. But when I was in Gratz, of course, I saw more of him. And one Motzei Shabbos, I'm sitting at home, and the phone rings. And it's him on the phone. And he says to me, Max, how old are you? So I'm taken back from him a little. So I said, whatever it was. He said, you know, it's time you went out on your own instead of being a second fiddle. So what are you talking about? He said, well, you know, in Cherry Hill, right across the bridge from you, Jake Levin is retiring as a director of the bureau there. I want you to apply for that job. I said, what do I know about being a bureau director?
Okay, who's calling you on the phone again? Who is it? It's Joe Noble? Or?
No, his buddy. What's his name?
That's okay. But he worked in Philly?
He was the director of Gratz College.
Oh, he was director of
the president.
Okay, president
of Gratz College.
Okay, so he's encouraging you to apply for this job in Cherry Hill.
Yeah, they want to really apply for that. I said, what do I know about being a director?
Hey, I wonder if Cherry Hill even still has a BJE.
Yeah. Today, I don't know. He said, now look, what do you got to lose? And it's right across the Tacony Palmyra Bridge from you. I said, all right, I'll give him a call. He gave me the name of the guy to call. So I called the guy up, and we arranged to meet at a restaurant or something a couple of days later. I drive in, we sit, we talk, and he says to me, well, you know, we have another candidate under consideration. If we decide on him, then that's it. If we decide not to go with him, then we'll give you a call and we'll see if we can offer you the job. I said, that's fine, no problem. A few days later, I get a call that they had offered the job to the guy that had interviewed, so the job was no longer available. Now, I'd called Likewitz to begin with. I don't want to go behind his back. And I told him this is what happened, and I'm going to talk to the guy. So I called Bill Likewitz and said, Bill, don't have to worry, I'm back. The job fell through, and
was he supportive?
Yeah. A few days go by, and I get a call from the guy who was then who was a member of the Educators Assembly, and who was then the chairman of the placement committee of the Educators Assembly. And he lived in Orange, New Jersey. And he called me and said, you know, I know you by face. I've met you at conventions, but I really don't know you. I'd like to know more about you. I'd like to meet you. I know that job in Cherry Hill fell through, but there's so many other opportunities, and I'd really like to know you a little more. I said, well, how can you say no to an older colleague? I was very flattered. So I got the directions how to get to him in Orange, New Jersey. It was not too far a drive from Philadelphia. And I drove in and I met with him. And after we schmoozed probably an hour and a half or 2 hours, I must have made some sort of an impression. He said to me, well, you know, I'm sorry about this job in Cherry Hill falling through, but so many other very fun opportunities. I'd like you to look into.
Well, again, what was his position?
He was the chairman of the placement committee of the Educators Assembly.
Educators Assembly is a division of the United Synagogue, isn't it?
Educators Assembly is the educators
arm
of the United Synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
They have the Rabbinical Assembly, Educators Assembly, and they have something
Cantorial also.
Cantorial Assembly, and they have executive directors, whatever they call themselves, not assembly.
Mm-hmm.
Said, okay, I said, for instance, what kind of positions? He said, there's something in Cincinnati, Ohio. I said, what's a Cincinnati? You've heard these things in television in Cincinnati. Have you ever been to Cincinnati? That's all I knew about Cincinnati. He said, Iyar ve'em b'Yisrael. Great city in Jewish life. I said, look, I'm really not interested in relocating. I'm with Bill Lackett. I enjoy the work there. He's a wonderful guy. I really, what will it hurt you to look?
Okay.
Darn.
He knew Zaleski was retiring.
Yeah. I came home and told your mother that. And she said the same thing. What will it hurt you to look? You can always say no. So I called Nate Kaplan here in Cincinnati and rearranged for me to come out.
Where was Nate Kaplan?
Nate Kaplan was the president of the Bureau. Nate had been with the Bureau for God knows how many years, and he was the kind of guy who would come to Federation meetings to talk about the allocation for the Bureau, and he'd talk your head off until finally they gave him his money just to get rid of him.
This little man, bald with a white mustache?
No, he was a little man, and he was bald, but no, but mustache.
White mustache?
No.
Picture him. Okay.
Anyhow, I flew in. Cincinnati had at that point one. At the airport, you'd have the different
one terminal.
One terminal, which is now Terminal A.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it came in a DC-10
propeller,
double prop.
Ugh, terrible.
Drove up, came up to the tarmac, lowered the wing, walked down to the tarmac and the staircase, and here's Nate Kaplan to greet me at the foot of the plane.
Well, that's neat. That's flattering.
They allowed people to go out there. You can't do that.
Not a chance.
And took me in his car to the Carousel Motel here, which was then the height of its glory, and bought me a room at near the swimming pool, which was the cat's meow.
Yeah.
And he started to talk to me the minute we got off the tarmac, and didn't stop till we got to the hotel room.
He was recruiting hard.
He was a sweet guy. And he was devoted to Zaleski. And then he transferred the devotion to me. Then I don't remember the sequence of events. He took me. We had a meeting of the board of the Bureau, and he took me there. And that time there must have been 30 people sitting around a table from all shades of the community, and they grilled me for half an hour or more. How would I deal with the reform schools? Would I visit them on Saturdays? And I said, no, I would not. But I assumed to have classes on Sundays as well. I visited them then. Asked me about everything under the sun. And then they excused me.
How irrelevant that became.
Well, then they excused me. And I went out. This was at the OC, at the JCC. And I was out in the hall, was out there maybe 10 minutes and so forth. And then Nate Kaplan came out and said, Mazel Tov, they've elected you as the new director of the Bureau. I said, we haven't accepted. Well,
what's the offer?
The offer then was, I wrote myself a contract, right, which I gave to him. And I asked for, I was making almost 12,000 at the board, or maybe it's 12,500, and then I asked for 25.
That's a big jump up.
So they came across with an offer of 22.5 the first year and 25 the second year. So okay, I'll take it.
You didn't talk to Mom first?
No, well, I didn't have that yet. But
All right.
they came home, and by the way, after the meeting, Nate takes me his car back to the motel. And I figure, okay, now I can go into the motel and go to sleep and have a little rest.
Nothing doing.
Came in, talked some more.
He was eager.
I flew home the next day and said to your mother, there's a nut there. He wouldn't give me a minute's peace. You talked my head off. Anyhow, she convinced me to go. So I took it on the basis of 22.5 and 5 second year, at 25 second year, and pension, and hospitalization, and then they're paying the moving expenses, the whole 7 years.
Right.
So that's how I came in.
And the position,
I hadn't the foggiest idea what one does in the Bureau.
I was going to say.
I hadn't the foggiest idea. Then I learned what they had done in the past, what Celestica had done now. Obviously, you know the blind man who described an elephant? The blind man? The one who felt his front said he's got a big schlang or something in front. The one who the tongue on his back said there's a little whisk or something floating around. And each one described the elephant differently, because all described the part they knew.
Right.
What I heard about what they did, or what Zaleski did, is colored by the fact that nobody really knew what he did. I assume he tried his best. He was 25 years to provide some services to the community. Mind you, the Bureau had originally been established in 1925. It was, I think, the third Bureau established in the United States. And basically it was established to coordinate the disparate Hebrew schools that were operating and the Chadorim that were operating without any kind of leadership. And at that time they had one in Price Hill, and one in Kentucky,
Avondale.
And in Avondale. And they'd hired over the years a number of different directors to run the school. Eventually, I think the way the community dissipated in Price Hill and in Covington, it was basically a Talmud Torah in Cincinnati. And eventually they bought a synagogue building that had been vacated by Israel, and they put a little office in for the Bureau. But its primary job was still running a Talmud Torah. And to this day, you meet somebody who said, I'm with the Bureau of Jewish Education, and tell you, I went to school in the Bureau.
I went to school in the Bureau.
I went to school in the Bureau. Eventually, I guess, there was a realization that there are really two different personalities. There was a Bureau, and there was a Talmud Torah. The people who were the big machas and supporters of the Bureau were really the Talmud Torah people. They had a natural stake. And at that time, there were a lot of people here in town who were not necessarily religious, but they were Yudea Sefer.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have that anymore today. You have more religious than that then, but not knowledgeable people. So eventually it split into two organizations with two separate board of directors. A number of people who served in the Bureau in the 30s and in the 40s later went on to some very, very big leadership positions. One became director of the Cleveland Board of Education, another became director of the Bureau in New York, and I guess they looked for things to do. So they began to, I guess, to find things for Bureau to bring into the adult community.
To become more of a resource to the community.
So they had Melave Malkus. They had cantorial concerts. They had some adult classes, the trial things.
But Jewish educational content provided for the community came out of the Bureau.
Right. At some point, Zaleski, during this 25 years, was in charge of both. So, to all intents and purposes, he ran the Talmud Torah, which had shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. By the time it came here, it was vestigial. During his tenure, I guess, he too was looking for things to do. So he tried to organize in-service classes for teachers. He put out a teacher's newsletter with help in instructional problems. He had an adults program. He tried different things. I don't think he ever got real credit for it. If you asked him what he did nothing. He was known as a good raconteur.
25 years of nothing is a long nothing.
He was a good raconteur. He would sing Yiddish and Hebrew songs. He would tell stories. People enjoyed talking with him. But to ask him what he did nothing. He didn't do nothing. He did what he could with what he had. He developed a junior federation to fundraise for the federation.
A young leadership division.
Yeah. It was a joke, but he tried it. Charlie Becker, whom he hired as assistant, ran a newsletter for him, which was distributed to all the schools, and the kids used it for the airplanes.
When you look back on your 25 years as the executive director of the Bureau, what are the things that you're most proud of, the accomplishments that you gave to the Bureau? Things that you introduced or things that you maintained?
Well, for one thing, I tried to continue with what we call teacher education. Annual conferences bring in people from outside, visiting the schools, whatever. I gave it up after a while. It didn't.
Visiting or teacher conferences?
Visiting. Teacher conferences, I continued. That's one of the things that is left from the Bureau that Federation is still doing. Once a year they have a citywide conference. What a lot of people don't, to this day, understand is that Jewish education isn't for kinder. They still think Jewish education is the Sunday school and the Hebrew school. I try to get something on adult level. The Melton School, which we ran for about 9 years, was fantastic. And I can't take that much credit for it. I think most of the credit belongs to Nancy Klein, who ran it for me. But I picked her. Our book fairs. See,
how much did you pay her for that? Do you recall?
She started at about $5,000, and I think worked up to 20-some.
What a bargain.
Oh yeah. The teacher center was something that we developed.
You saw that in Chicago, no?
One of my principals came back to us with stories of what happened in Chicago. And why can't we do it? I said, why can't we?
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit did it. I went to the women's group. What's it? The National Council of Jewish Women, and I got them to give me $6,000. I went to Federation and got $6,000 from them. With that, we started a thing. I paid it the director of $5,000-$6,000.
That was Sunny.
That was Sandy McBlack.
Where'd you find her?
I don't know, but she was really.
She was your favorite.
She was really the one for that job. And of course, it's changed over the years completely. And then, by the time Larry Katz came, he took that over, and he really developed the videos and cassettes and so forth. But Larry was very disorganized, a slob, and the people followed him weren't much better, and so that was not well run, and things disappeared and never came back. But the teacher center was a big thing. We finally built a beautiful room, and I raised $125,000 to do it, and that was good. Under Zaleski, the Bureau had done some culture programs in conjunction with the JCC, and they call it a JCA Culture Series. But it was mostly local amateur talent, nothing special. I brought big names from all over the place, and
a couple times a year,
3 or 4 times a year, and I did this because I felt it was important to bring these kinds of experience to the community, not to raise funds. So what we charged was absolutely ludicrous. I would charge $18 for a season of 4 programs.
That's nothing.
Today I charge you $35 at the door for one.
Right.
But we brought people like people down on Broadway.
Mike Burstein?
Burstein was here, and then Bruce Adler was here. A number of top chazonim were here, and so forth.
And choirs and
yeah. But we never got really. What it started with, what's it called? The Jewish Welfare Board had a department of Yiddish. Melotic was in charge of that, and they would send out a Yiddish touring company once a year, all over the country, with Yiddish shtick, and Zaleski would bring them in once a year. They charged really next to nothing, $1,000 or something for a group of 4, to come for a performance, because it was heavily underwritten. I continued that for a while. But the people who understand Yiddish would appreciate a Yiddish theater program.
Fewer and fewer.
Right. They were dying out.
Right.
They'd like to think they know Yiddish, but if they hear a Yiddish word, that's the Yiddish. But a skit with people talking to each other. So, but I did some of that at first too. But that I think was important, because I think Jewish culture is Jewish education. I brought in a book fair. I didn't start the book fair. Book fair was started years earlier by a community shaliach as an Israeli program. He brought in Israeli books and Israeli tapes, and it was promoted by Federation, with a lot of volunteers, and spent a fortune on fancy paper and invitations. They lost a shirt on him, but it was a book fair. When he left the shaliach, nobody picked it up. So I picked it up, but I wasn't interested in promoting Israel per se. I was promoting in Jewish books.
Mm-hmm.
So I would fill 2 rooms with books that the desks and the tables would groan under the weight. And I brought in the Stanzas, and I brought in, you name it. I brought in the JPS, Tanakh, and all sorts of things, the art scroll material. And then in addition to that...
And the artwork too.
We brought in artwork, and I brought in Hanukkah supplies. And it had a big following. Turned out eventually to be a profit maker, but I worked like a dog. And your mother can tell you how I schlepped books up and down the hall, and I spent hours
cataloging and
the whole thing. But it was worthwhile. I saw somebody just last week, in the restaurant when we were leaving. He said to me, "I missed the book fair."
Yep.
I built a library.
There's a lot. I'll tell you what. The interesting thing about the book fair, although you also got books in consignment to sell specifically for the book fair, but most of your inventory you kept in the bureau.
I did all the bookstore year round. And again, my motive wasn't profit. My motive was to get this into Jewish hands. So I didn't sell a single book at list price. Everything was discounted. If a book cost me 40% off, I sold it at 20% off, or whatever. But nothing was sold at full price. So I didn't lose, but I didn't make any fortune. Where that money is gone, by the way, I don't know.
What do you mean?
It's disappeared.
Well, how much money was it when you left?
Probably had about $30,000-$40,000 left.
Interesting.
And Federation must have
it. Got gobbled up.
Yeah. I built a library. And though it wasn't the biggest library in the world, some people said, "What do you need a library for?" HEC is a library. Yeah, people from here don't go to HEC to the library. There's a library downtown too, but people go to Bound Hill. I mean, I built it without it costing them a nickel. How? First of all, I put up plaques in the wall. I charged $750 a plaque. With that, I was able to buy wood and uprights, and I hired a guy to drill holes in the wall and install it, and I worked right with him. I went out and bought the wood. I went out and bought the paint. I painted it stuff.
And yeah, you got to break through the wall, remember?
Yeah, and we put this thing up. I'd go to the library book fair. At the end of the year, the library would sell all used books, overstocks. And we'll pick they had a lot of good Jewish books. I picked it up for next to nothing. And then eventually, when I went into buying books, I had books, I would buy them at a fraction of the cost. We asked people to bring in books that they no longer, people inherit from parents. A lot of them were old Siddur, Machzor, whatever, but we found some good stuff too. That's how little by little I built up the library. Then when I had more money, I bought books.
What I thought was amazing was that so many of the books that made their way into the book sale, the book fair, and the book fair took a lot of space.
Oh yeah,
a lot of tables. But you found a way to cram that all in that little bookstore.
No. I'd send back probably 10, 12 cartons of books.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which was a job too, packing and then comparing what I sold and what I owe and all that sort of stuff. But I maintained a year-round bookstore How did I do that? Again, it started with next to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I got some catalogs in of overstocks. And I'd be able to get some decent books at at maybe $2 that were $30 books.
Right.
All right. So I'd sell them for $5.
Right. Right.
But that's how I built it up slowly. And I had quite a large number of overstock stores that I bought from. You know the book, the Mishkan?
The book called The Mishkan? Mm-mm. No.
There's a beautiful coffee table book of the Mishkan, all the parts of it, how its construction, everything else.
Yeah.
It retails at $75. I picked them up for $5. I sold them for $25.
So a bargain for everybody. I remember last year I was at a conference for work, and Mordechai Rosenstein was at the conference showing his artwork.
Mm-hmm.
You have some of his artwork pieces in the home. He hadn't shown his artwork in many, many, many years. But I mentioned to him you. I mentioned him to you. I mentioned you.
To him.
To him. And he remembered you showing his stuff in Cincinnati.
Yeah. Well, I exhibited a lot of different artists. I always wanted, I didn't want a smorgasbord of 15 artists, 2 pieces from this one, 2 pieces from that one. I wanted to schedule a showing of a particular artist, at the most 2 of them. Michael Schwartz's stuff was beautiful. Michael Schwartz never, I think, maybe he's nifter already.
I know he was very ill. He was Alzheimer's.
Yeah. He's a sweetheart of a guy.
And extraordinarily talented.
But some Israelis, there's a lot of Israeli, there's a lot of Israeli art that have nothing to do with Yiddishkeit.
Yossi Stern, a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, but there's a lot of they paint pictures of women, pictures of shops in Paris. I'm not interested in that.
You're looking for Judaica.
And we placed a lot of that stuff. So that was something that I was proud of doing. What else? I don't know.
How about Marshall Living?
Well, I introduced that. Yeah, they're still doing it. As a matter of fact,
in a very big way. David Weiss is very active in that.
Yeah. And it's been copied, by other organizations with other names. I think Federation here has a visit to Israel and Poland, which is not a March of the Living.
We go. NCSY goes.
Yeah. The same thing I did with the program in Washington, D.C., where we bring...
Panim Panim.
Panim Panim, yeah.
That's one that had the big scandal a couple years ago.
They all have scandals sooner or later. But, no, I tried to do what I could. I couldn't do much with the children, because I don't run a school. And there's just so much you can do.
And you didn't control the money that went to the school. They went straight from Federation, so you didn't have any power over the school.
One of my presidents, Lou Jacobs, who's a very sweet guy, lost all cheshik in the bureau, and I'm sure all cheshik in me, because when I came here, one of my goals had been that the bureau would eventually become the major force for Jewish education in Cincinnati, which would mean we would run the afternoon schools and the day schools. But that in turn meant that we would handle the money. Federation's going to give us the money.
Right.
And if you don't have that,
you have no power.
What power have you got? I can just see where I would go to Adith Israel and tell them what to do.
Right. They'll tell you where to go. You were with the Bureau for 25 years.
Yep.
I remember at the very beginning, one of the things that certain people in the community wanted to see happen was the merger of Yavne and Chofetz Chaim. That was never going to happen.
Well, that was one of the basic things that the Bureau was charged with. I came here in 1971. In 1967 or 68, something like that, there was a study of Jewish education in Cincinnati conducted at the request of Federation conducted by the American Association for Jewish Education.
Mm-hmm.
And they sent 3 Gedolei Dor down to assess the state of Jewish education in Cincinnati. They included Alvin Schiff, they included a few other guys on the same level as Alvin Schiff.
Mm-hmm.
They spent 3 days in town, or 4 days. I had to interview this, that, the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went back to New York and wrote a report. And I'll tell you what you can do with the report.
Whoa, yeah.
Not that there was anything wrong with them, but unless you really know the community, it's meaningless.
Right.
At that time, Hebrew Day School was a zoo. They had maybe 30, 40 kids, most of them in the preschool, and those that were not running around like Meshuggahs in the hall. The director was completely incompetent. Yavne was not much bigger. It had where Chabad is now, on the summit. It was run a little bit better, but it was also a small school. And what these 4 guys that surveyed came to the conclusion was that they're not viable, any of them, and that they should be given an opportunity to reach viability over a period of 6 months or a year, whatever. And if they're not viable by then, they should be merged. Merge water and fire.
What's amazing about it is that the schools, and this is, for me, one of the anomalies of Cincinnati, which is that the schools were so much smaller in terms of their enrollment than they are today.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I just can't escape the feeling that this community is so much poorer Jewishly than it was then.
Sure, because you don't have these Yodea Sefer anymore. The element that controls Jewish life is an element of ignoramuses.
Right. But these kids are not going. It's just tragic. And the kids were going. Well, do you know what the enrollment is at Chofetz Chaim, or any sense of what the enrollment would be? A couple hundred.
When I was running the bureau, one of the things that I did was conduct annual surveys of enrollment, and those fed into the figures that the American Association had for a national census.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
When I left, forget it, the whole thing fell apart. Nobody was going to bother with that anymore. So I don't know that anybody knows how many kids are in the schools anymore. But I have the feeling that Yavne is down to probably 300 or less,
Mm-hmm.
when they planned the new buildings and put all the money in the buildings, they were planning for an enrollment of 500 plus. It never materialized. And Hebrew Day has been able to hang on to pretty much the same numbers over the years, and probably between 125 and 150, which is, don't forget too that they have families with a lot of kinderlach.
Right, so it's fewer families, but more kids. I'm intrigued with something like Yavne, when the numbers start falling off.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a function of changing interests and values in the community, or the fact that population sizes just tend to peak and valley? I mean, maybe there are fewer kids? Maybe that's why the school is shrinking. Or is the community just losing interest again?
I think it's probably some of both.
And people are disaffected with public schools.
Yavne began to grow by leaps and bounds when enrollment in day schools became not only accepted,
prestigious,
but prestigious, right?
What was as an alternate?
When I first came to town, people who said the day schools, those are self-hating Jews that want to segregate themselves.
Isolate, right?
Yeah.
But I always thought that the reason why the schools started swelling was because people were so disaffected by the public schools.
Sure.
But that hasn't gotten better.
You have a push-pull system. So, some people are attracted, pulled in by what the school has to offer. Some people are repelled by the public schools and are pushed out.
Public schools have certainly not gotten better.
No.
But
no.
day school education is not as prestigious as it was even 10 years ago.
But the schools where Jews live are decent schools.
Schools were, yes.
The schools in Sycamore Township are good schools.
Right. But they were good schools when the day schools started getting more prestigious.
Jews didn't live there then.
Is that true?
Jews lived in here, in Roselawn, were lousy schools, where they lived in Avondale.
Maybe.
Lousy neighborhoods, Bond Hill.
Maybe. I don't know.
But
even when I was in Yavna, people were moving out to Sycamore.
Yes.
But I had
there's some good schools in Sycamore.
I understand that, but I had a very tiny enrollment in my day.
Mm-hmm.
And 10 years later, it exploded. And people were...
Because it became prestigious.
It's fascinating.
The leadership of Federation
started promoting it.
Discovered Yavna.
Right.
And they put their children in and put their money in, and it grew by leaps and bounds.
Because their kids were there. That's really what it was.
I don't know if it's the leadership getting older, and they don't have those kids anymore, or the new kids, the new people who aspire to leadership
don't have their kids there.
Don't have the cheshik.
Or their kids there.
They don't have the cheshik, don't have their kids there.
Right. It's fascinating. Just it goes up and down. What else I want to ask you about the Bureau? Talk to me a little bit about the end of your career at the Bureau.
Well, I think to some extent I'm responsible for that myself.
How so?
I don't want to knock myself. I have a lot of qualities and a lot of abilities, but some things I don't have. I don't have the organizational skill to deal with boards. A board has to be grown. It has to be nurtured. It has to be cuddled. I have a board elected, and I see him at board meetings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, I've neglected the board. And the board is the thing that holds the organization together. I'm not a promoter. And you got to promote those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I have failed. But what happened over the years is the Bureau no longer ran a Talmud Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people who see Jewish education as Talmud Torah education, what good is the Bureau? What does it do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who needs it?
Right.
I saw the guy who was going to come in as a new president of the Federation, and I showed him to the teacher center, and showed him to the library. I was very proud.
Mm-hmm.
What are you in the library for? We got a library at we're going to come out. What are we in the teacher center for? Each school have its own.
Right. Toward the end, when you were ending your career at the Bureau, is approximately the time when continuity was all the rage in the Federation world.
No, I think the continuity craze had already passed.
It had already passed?
I think it had already passed. But they didn't know what they wanted about continuity anyhow. But what happened with the Bureau, I think, was decay from within. And that was fueled by decay from outside. Federation had wanted to close the Bureau down since Zaleski's days. I staunched that for 25 years. I held them off. As long as I was there, they wouldn't close it.
Mm-hmm.
But I left. And the guy that appointed after me was a rabbi, HSC rabbi, who really wanted to get into the pulpit, just did as a favor.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't care less what happened to the Bureau.
Mm-hmm.
So the Federation didn't have any strong opposition there. Little by little, our strong proponents in the Federation board declined, both in numbers and in influence. So the Federation's wish to close the Bureau down became easy to implement. The last year I was here, the Federation in one stroke cut our allocation by $50,000.
That's huge. What do you cut out when you lose $50,000?
As I said, they didn't see the need for a library, they didn't see the need for a teacher center. They didn't, adult education, congregations provide adult education. The book fair, congregation has their own book fair, don't need you for that. JCNA,
We got JCC, they'll do culture. Right.
And then what happened was that the membership of the board itself, I think, failed to grasp what a jewel they had. And they themselves said, what do we need this for? And they decided to call it quits.
So they voted themselves out of existence. Federation gobbled it up, but then pretty much everything disappeared.
Federation, first of all, they threw out such stuff. I kept a file of all the board minutes going back to the 1920s. Don't ask me what is violence. It was thrown out. I had a copy of the 18...
That's something that the Brandeis Center would love to get a hold on. If they had.
Something that our own center here.
Yeah, HUC also. Right?
The archives. I had a single copy left of the Constitution of the Talmud Torah Society from the 1800s.
Wow, that's a great archive.
Yeah. They threw everything out.
Wow. But 25 years of a good parnasa. What was your budget at the max?
I don't remember anymore. It was over 200,000.
Yeah.
And that riled them too. See, as long as the bureau was costing them $20,000 a year, $30,000 a year, nicht gefährdet. But when the bureau is asking for $125,000, all of a sudden this is money.
Right. Where'd Larry go? What was Larry's last name?
Larry Katz.
Katz.
He became bureau director in New England.
Yeah.
Still there.
He is still there.
Yeah. He would, see again, I'm the world's worst correspondent. He'd drop me, family newsletters every year, what they were doing, what the kids were doing, and all that. I never responded. Eventually, they would stop coming.
What do you think? So you've been living in Cincinnati since 1971?
It's 1971 for that.
So that's how many years?
36 years.
How's Cincinnati fared compared to any other community you lived in?
Well, it's home. I've never lived here longer than any place else.
You've seen this community change also.
The community has changed. In the last few years when we were talking about should we stay, should we leave, one thing became very clear: there's no place in Cincinnati itself I would want to move to.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to move to Golf Manor.
Mm-hmm.
What's in Golf Manor?
Right.
To move to...
there's only one thing in Golf Manor, which is a shul. That's it.
That's about it, and that's not what it used to be.
Right.
It's not in the shul.
It's not, no. Yeah, of course.
Any place else, aside from the fact that the cost of housing will be twice of what I can sell this house for, I would not be within walking distance of the shul.
Right.
And if I were able to find something, it wouldn't be an Orthodox shul.
Right.
So there's no place in Cincinnati. To move out of town is a question of where. And what it even pays at my age to relocate someplace else.
Right.
Your mother would love your neighborhood, but who can afford to live there?
Yeah, I can't. Right.
we could buy a house like Jeff's in Florida, but then you have the same problems: no shul, no kashrus, no nothing, no yiddishkeit,
Right.
any sort. Here, at least, we have we have access to kosher food. We got access to the shul even if it's only in the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur.
Right.
Why would we move?
Right.